Hi, my name is Dean Kershaw, Kershaw Instrumentation. We're here today to talk about our newest tack instrument, the Tackmaster model TM16U. We've been manufacturing the Tackmaster for more than 20 years. This is our latest version. Mechanically, this machine is very similar to the older models of the Tackmaster, being the Tackmaster 92 and the Tackmaster 07. Where this machine is advantageous is we have incorporated a touchscreen PLC. This touchscreen PLC essentially eliminates all of the previous electronics that were in the models, in the earlier models, and all of the input and output parameters in this machine are all monitored and controlled through the PLC. The fact that it's so simple gives us reliability, means that there's a lot less components now, and also with the PLC we can offer a lot of features that we were not able to offer on the other on the earlier models. So we're actually dividing this demonstration into two streams. This is the introductory to this machine. It's going to be relatively short. We're going to just give a quick overview of this machine, how it operates, and the advantages that it has. This stream will be followed by a more in-depth stream, which we're going to call a technical discussion. And in the technical discussion, we're going to talk about the calibration and the setup, and we'll get involved with some of the nitty-gritty of what's involved in maintaining and operating this machine. This machine also comes with a couple peripherals. We supply a point of sale cash register type printer that essentially will print out the results of the test when we're actually running the test. We're going to demonstrate that in a few minutes. We actually have a printer here. This is an older model. The printers that we supply with these machines are newer and more modern than that. That just happened to be one we had here in the lab that we use for this demo. In addition to that, we also have a computer interface that we supply for this machine. And with the computer interface, if we look over here at our plot, what happens is when we run the test, we're actually going to get a tack versus time curve. We're going to get a graph that's going to show the tack of the ink as we run our test. We're also going to get a temperature plot over here, and we get some marks of the temperature so we can monitor the temperature of the brass roll. We're not going to discuss this computer interface too much because it is a relatively simple device. But if you purchase the computer interface, essentially we're going to supply the software on a CD. You're going to load that into your PC. Your PC now will connect to the PLC on the machine, and it will be able to monitor the tack, the temperature, and the speed during a test and generate these curves. After the curves are generated, we can superimpose one curve over another after we save them. So that enables you to compare your ink to a competitor's ink, one manufacturer's ink to another. If you're running a series of inks like the process colors, you can now superimpose a red curve over a blue curve over a black curve that will represent what the tack differences are in a set of inks, and solve trapping problems and things of that nature. So again, we're not going to talk too much about the computer interface. If you have any questions, get a hold of us. We'll be happy to discuss that in more detail. Right now we're going to discuss the PLC. When we turn this machine on, it goes to our mode screen, which essentially is our home screen. You'll see the time and the date is displayed here. We have three areas: the test panel, the calibrate area, and the test setup area. We're not going to discuss in this portion, but we will discuss these in greater detail in the technical discussion. We are going to discuss the test area. If I touch this green icon here, it takes us to the manual screen. Now on the manual screen we have several features. We have the tack display here, we have the speed display here, and we also have the motor control buttons. The low being the yellow, the low speed being the yellow button, high speed being the blue button. I can change my desired speed simply by keying this in. I'm going to set this to 1200 for the high. We'll set our low to Let's set it to 225. Here's my temperature display over here. Now you can see I can either run the machine from here, as so, but we also have these hard buttons over here, and with these hard buttons, they're color-coded to match these icons here. And if I'm fearful of the operator touching the screen when he's got ink and solvent on his hands, he can actually operate the machine from these hard buttons the same as you can from the colored icons, as I'm demonstrating here. Now, one other feature we have, you'll see there's a rectangle over here that is labeled dry. It's colored green at the moment. As you'll find out in the technical discussion, there's actually two methods of calibrating this machine. We can calibrate it with a tack standard ink, which would be an ink calibration, or we can calibrate it with a calibration bar, which is a dry calibration. Well, I have the ability to be able to select which calibration method I want to use simply by touching this button here. You'll see it says ink, so that would be ink standard. It says dry, so that would be weight standard. That pretty well covers all the features on the manual screen. We also have this little yellow question mark, which you'll see come up a lot of places in the operating system. If I touch that, it gives me some text that describes what we're seeing on this manual operation screen, essentially a form of online help. And again, you'll see that question mark pop up in other areas within this operating system, and you can use that as a guide if you have any questions. So without further ado, I want to demonstrate the automatic operation of this machine, and to give you a little bit of this discussion to make this not confusing. In the technical section that you're going to see later on, if you choose to watch it, there's an area in there which we call the auto setup parameters, and in those auto setup parameters we're going to set up the parameters that we're going to use for an automatic test. For example, the distribution speed that we're going to distribute the ink, the time that we're going to distribute the ink, the test time, the test speed, and what calibration method do we want to use. Do we want to use the dry calibration or the ink calibration? We're going to set all that stuff in the I've already set up all of these things in the automatic setup parameters, and in the technical discussion we will show you actually how that setup is done. So when we run the test, it's going to go out and grab those parameters that I had set up earlier, and it's going to use those to actually run the test. And we'll talk about those parameters as we actually run the test. So the first thing I'm going to do to prepare for my test is I want to just run this at the operating speed that I want to run and check my zero and make sure that my rollers are clean and everything is nice and stable. Now you can see here's our speed over here. We're hovering right around that 1200. This machine has the ability to hold the speed to within 5 RPMs of our targeted speed. So you're going to see this settle in right around 1200. And here's our tack value over here. We're very close to zero. I'm just going to do a little fine tune on that. Our speed's right there at 1200. Our tack is at zero, so we're ready to run our test. So I'm going to turn off the rolls. I'm going to apply the ink as we normally would. You notice I'm only putting the ink on a distributor roll. I'm not touching the top roll because that's relatively delicate. Okay, if I have the ink on the roll, I'm just going to give that a little turn. Now I'm going to either press the green start icon here or the green button. It's going to ask me which auto test I want to use because I have more than one. I'm going to select number 1. So now it goes right to the distribution mode, 250 RPM, and we're counting down 2 seconds, 1 second. Automatically goes to our test mode. There's our tack. We're counting up 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds, and so forth. Over here it's telling us that we're going to print out every 15 seconds. You hear our printer printing out over there. And our test is going to end in 60 seconds. We're going to let this run for the full minute. We're plotting the data over here on the computer, which you can't see, but I showed you the plot before. We're printing out here on our 15-second intervals, and we're updating our display. You can see our speed is right on at 1200. We've got a tack in this particular case of around 12 and a half. And we're up to 46 seconds. 50 seconds. So in 10 seconds this test is going to end, and we're going to talk about what's going to happen, or you're going to see what's going to happen when it ends. Here we go, 60 seconds. There's our final printout. It holds our final tack number on the screen, being 12.0, which was the tack number that we expected for this particular ink. Now you notice the rollers didn't stop turning. They went down to 150 RPM, which we call our idle speed. Now the purpose of this is if the operator walks away for a moment to do something else, they can come back. They have a printout over here of their tack number. They have their final tack value is held on this display, and the rollers are turning. I had my idle speed set at 140, and you can see we're right there. The rollers will continue to turn so the ink doesn't dry out, we don't get flat spots in the rubber, etc., etc. This will run at this idle speed indefinitely. Now the operator comes over, makes sure that he has his printout, records this number here if he doesn't have a printer, and he can just push stop, and it takes us back to our manual screen. And from our manual screen now, we would manually adjust the speed so we could do the cleanup and prepare for the next test. So with that, that concludes our demonstration. Hopefully you have a good overview of the basic operation of this machine. And if you have questions about some of the things that you saw here in terms of the calibration and the auto test setup, please take a look at our more in detailed technical discussion of this instrument.